Did you know that a youth revolution is brewing in Nigeria inspired by Kenya's Gen Z? From August 1st to 10, 2024, Nigerian youth will take to the streets for 10 days of nationwide protests. This unprecedented move aims to shake up the country's governance and address pressing issues like overtaxation and electoral fraud. The spark for this movement came from Kenya, where Gen Z recently led powerful protests against bad governance and tax reforms. These Kenyan youth made waves globally with their social media savvy and fresh approach to advocacy. Their efforts paid off big time, resulting in the rejection of the Finance Bill 2024 and even some changes in government spending. Now, Nigerian youth are taking a page from Kenya's playbook. They're using social media to rally support with hashtags like Bad Governance in Nigeria 2024. Just like in Kenya, there are no specific leaders. It's all about collective action. These young Nigerians want to tackle corruption, reform the electoral system, and lower the cost of living. It's a new era of cross-border inspiration among African youth. So what exactly are these young Nigerians planning? Well, get ready for 10 days that could shake up the nation. From August 1st to August 10th, 2024, Nigeria's youth will take to the streets in a nationwide protest that's set to make waves. But why now? What's driving these young people to action? It seems President Bola Tinubu's policies have struck a nerve. Many accuse him of hurting Nigeria's economy, piling on taxes, and letting corruption run wild. The youth are fed up with seeing their hard-earned money disappear into a system that doesn't seem to give back. One of the biggest complaints? Taxes. These young Nigerians feel like they're being squeezed dry, with nothing to show for it. They're asking, where are the new roads, the better schools, the improved healthcare? It's not just about paying less, it's about seeing results from what they do pay. And it's not just taxes. The list of demands is long and covers many areas of life in Nigeria. The youth want to see inflation under control, lower costs for basics like electricity and fuel, and a justice system that works for everyone. They're even calling for national borders to be reopened and for the people in charge of elections to be truly independent. What's really interesting is how they're organizing all this. Just like their Kenyan counterparts, Nigeria's youth are turning to social media to spread the word and get people involved. They're not relying on traditional leaders or organizations. Instead, they're creating a movement that belongs to everyone. You've probably seen some of the hashtags if you've been on social media lately. Bad Governance in Nigeria 2024 and Bad Governance 2024 have been popping up all over the place. It's a smart move using platforms where young people already hang out to build momentum and share information. This approach has some big advantages. For one, it's harder for the government to shut down or control. There's no central office to close, no single leader to pressure. It's a movement that lives in the phones and computers of thousands of young Nigerians. But it's not just about complaining. These youth are looking for real changes. They want to see a Nigeria that works for everyone, not just a select few. They're demanding transparency, accountability, and a government that listens to its people. It's a bold move inspired by what they saw happen in Kenya. Remember how those protests led to some big changes? The Finance Bill 2024 got rejected, and even President William Ruto had to make some adjustments to his plans. Now, Nigeria's youth are hoping they can create the same kind of impact. So as August 1st approaches, all eyes will be on Nigeria. Will these 10 days of protests bring about the changes these young people are hoping for? Or will it be business as usual? One thing's for sure. Nigeria's youth are awake. They're organized, and they're ready to make their voices heard. You might be wondering what exactly these Nigerian youth are protesting against. Well, it turns out they have quite a list of complaints, and many of them sound familiar to what we heard from Kenya. Let's take a closer look at what's got Nigeria's young people fired up and ready for change. First up, there's the economy. Nigerian youth are feeling the pinch of high inflation and rising costs for basics like electricity and fuel. They're saying the current government policies are making things worse, not better. It's not just about having less money in their pockets. It's about seeing their dreams for the future slip away. But that's not all. These young Nigerians are also calling out what they see as rampant corruption. They're tired of seeing money disappear into a system that doesn't seem to give anything back. Where are the new roads, schools, and hospitals they were promised? It's a question that's getting louder by the day. And here's something interesting. Just like in Kenya, Nigeria's youth are taking aim at their tax system. They feel they're being overtaxed without seeing any real benefits. It's a complaint that echoes what we heard from Kenyan protesters not too long ago. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds a lot like what happened in Kenya, and you'd be right. The similarities are pretty striking. Both countries saw their young people rise up against what they saw as bad governance and unfair economic policies. In both cases, social media played a big role in getting the word out and keeping people connected. But here's where things get really interesting. Just like in Kenya, Nigeria's protest movement doesn't have any clear leaders. It's all about collective action. No one person is in charge. Instead, it's a movement that belongs to everyone. This makes it harder for the government to shut down or control. There's no central office to close, no single leader to pressure. Instead, the movement lives on social media. Hashtags like #EndBadGovernance in Nigeria 2024 are spreading like wildfire, helping to organize and unite young people across the country. It's a smart move that's helped the movement gain traction quickly. But it's not just about complaining online. These youth are planning real-world action. They're calling for President Bola Tinubu to step down. They want to see big changes, like lower salaries for public officers and a truly independent electoral body. They're even pushing for the country's borders to be reopened. It's clear that Nigeria's youth are taking inspiration from what they saw happen in Kenya. Remember how those protests led to the rejection of the Finance Bill 2024? Now, Nigerian youth are hoping they can create the same kind of impact in their own country. As we watch this movement unfold, it's hard not to see it as part of a bigger picture. Young people across Africa are standing up and demanding better from their governments. They're using new tools and tactics to make their voices heard. And they're learning from each other, sharing ideas and inspiration across borders. But it's not just Kenya and Nigeria making waves. Across Africa, a new generation is stepping up and speaking out. This isn't your typical protest movement. It's something bigger, bolder, and more connected than ever before. You might be wondering what's different about these young activists. Well, for starters, they're breaking down old barriers. Tribal divisions? Colonial hang-ups? Not for this crowd. They're united by something stronger, a shared vision for a better future. Take a look at social media, and you'll see what we mean. Young people from different countries are sharing ideas, tactics, and encouragement. It's like a virtual meeting ground for Africa's next generation of leaders. And here's the really interesting part. These youth aren't just copying each other. They're learning, adapting, and creating something new. Each country adds its own flavor to the mix, but the core message stays the same. It's time for change. Now, you might be thinking, we've seen protests before. What makes this different? Well, it's all about the approach. These young activists are tech-savvy, media-smart, and globally connected. They're using tools like never before to get their message out. But it's not just about making noise. These Gen Z activists are after real, lasting change. They're tackling big issues like corruption, unemployment, and unfair taxes. And they're not afraid to call out leaders who aren't measuring up. Here's a quote that really sums it up. The protests reflect the fearless and unified spirit of a generation that transcends tribal divisions. It's a new way of thinking, and it's spreading fast. So what does this mean for Africa's future? Well, it could be huge. We're talking about a whole generation that's ready to shake things up. They're demanding better governance, more accountability, and a fair shot at success. And it's not just talk. In Kenya, we saw how youth protests led to real changes in government policy. Now, other countries are taking notice. Leaders are starting to realize they can't ignore these young voices anymore. But here's the thing. This movement isn't just about individual countries. It's about reshaping the whole continent. These young activists are dreaming big. They want to see an Africa that's free from corruption, united in purpose, and ready to take on the world. Of course, it won't be easy. Change never is. But there's something different in the air this time. Maybe it's the energy of youth, or the power of social media, or just the feeling that the time is right. Whatever it is, one thing's for sure. Africa's Gen Z is on the move. They're crossing borders, breaking barriers, and demanding a better future. And they're just getting started. So what's next for this movement? Will it spread to more countries? Will it lead to lasting change? Only time will tell. But one thing's certain, the youth of Africa are awake, they're connected, and they're ready to make their mark on the world. So what could these protests mean for Nigeria and Africa? As we look ahead, it's clear that the youth movement in Nigeria has the potential to shake things up. If successful, these protests could lead to big changes in how the country is run. We might see new policies to fight corruption, fairer elections, and more attention to the needs of young people. But it's not just about Nigeria. This movement could inspire youth in other African countries to demand better from their governments too. Imagine a wave of change sweeping across the continent, driven by a generation that's connected, informed, and ready for action. Of course, change isn't easy, and there will be challenges along the way. But one thing's for sure, Africa's youth are writing a new chapter in the story of democracy on the continent.